We are honored today to have Ara Sarafyan, who is a historian specializing in late Ottoman and modern Armenian history with a graduate degree from University of Michigan, join us today to talk about Kharpert. I think that many of us who are on this call have parents, grandparents, great grandparents from Kharpert, because there was and is a large enclave of Kharpertsis in Rhode Island. There are in Massachusetts. Um, he is the co-founder of Gomidas Institute, which is located in London, and he is the executive director and has been since the 90s. The Institute sponsors and carries out research and publishes books on modern Armenian and regional studies. And Sarafyan has been going to Kharpert since 1985. Is that true, Ara?
Uh, 81 actually, but yes.
Oh, okay, 81. I'm off by 4 years. Okay. And you go there very
But I
frequently.
think I wrote 85 when I wrote to you, but yes.
Yeah, and you've done many trips to Kharpert, including one that's being planned in June, which is called Historic Armenia East to West from Kars to Kharpert, June 14th to June 23rd. And then at the end of his presentation, he will have a session with Q&A, and he will talk about the trip towards the end of his presentation. So Ara, it's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Martha, and the Armenian Historical Association of Rhode Island. This is the first time I'm talking about the Kharpert work I do with an American audience in this capacity. I'm a historian, as you said, since the 1980s. When I went to I live in London, so I went to Turkey on a curiosity. You know, just like you, I heard about where we came from. I'm part Kharpertsi, and I was a 19-year-old boy, and I decided, why don't I just go there? And that was the beginning of a whole career that unraveled itself. It was never planned. Even to this point, everything I've done have followed each other logically, but they were never planned. And I say this because I want to demystify the idea of doing academic work or doing work in Turkey, because too often people think it's like going to the moon. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. So the idea was to demystify this type of work and to show that it is possible to engage history in a very contemporary way and to make it relevant to who we are today and how we reflect our identity. So 1985, I went to Ankara to learn Turkish. And then I decided to go to University of Michigan, where I specialize in modern Armenian history and Ottoman history. And by the 1990s, I was already working in Turkish archives and gathering as much information as I could. I should say that American archives are of central importance to the work that I do, because the amount of material that's available in English because of the American missionary presence there. So a lot of my information came from there, and a lot of photographs that I will be showing you today were taken by the Melikian brothers in New England. So I thought I would start by showing you a map. I devised this map. This is a map of the Armenian world before World War I. It gives you a sense of where Armenians live in the Ottoman Empire in red. The green are the Armenians living in the Russian Empire. In the end, they amalgamate into the present-day Armenian Republic for the most part. And the blue are the Iranian Armenians, Persian Armenians. So when we talk of the Armenian world, this would give you a sense of the distribution of Armenian communities. And right in the middle is Kharpert. Right? So this is where our ancestors, many of our ancestors, come from. Now, to show you, as you can see, there's a box there. And that is a box from 1878. This is an extremely rare map because it shows it comes from an Armenian source. So it shows you the sort of information that the Armenian church had, the Armenian prelacy or diocese, Arashnortaran in Armenian had of the area. And the red are the Armenians, the green are the Kurds, and the gray are the Turks. So It's a mixed area where different ethnicities live side by side, but Armenians predominated in a central area, which were the agricultural zone. That's the most productive part. That's where Kharpert Plain is. And you can see that in those areas, Armenians were the overwhelming population, according to this source. Any source you have to take with an element of a pinch of salt. There's leeway there for over underestimation, but this gives you a good idea of what Kharpert would have looked like in terms of its ethnic mix: Christians and Muslims, Armenians, Turks, and Kurds. Kharpert itself, the town of Kharpert, is right in the center there, and there's a whole cluster of large villages: Huseinik, Mezre, um, Kesrik, all next to each other. In fact, what you'll find today is that all these villages today are actually part of the same town, because the Mezre became Elazığ, and it grew so much that they've been amalgamated into a single area. But this is the Kharpert that many of our ancestors left behind. If we were to come closer to World War I, this is what the Armenian, the Kharpert Plain looked like. The data comes from a population survey that the Armenian Patriarchate of Constantinople took. It only shows Armenian inhabited villages. So Muslim villages where there are no Armenians are not part of it. But this would have been the Armenian world as the Kharpertsi saw it. The yellow is, again, the plain. And what you have here are the mixed population. If you can see the dotted line, that's where Elazığ city is. There's a huge city there today. The blue areas are the areas that were flooded in the 70s when they built water dams for agriculture purposes. So many of the villages are now underwater. And what we see is that the whole geography of the area has been changing over the last 100 years, like any other part of the world. This is a detailed map because not only does it give you population statistics, it also tells you the number of people from these villages who were elsewhere, including our ancestors. So, for example, in Huseinik, you have 4,500 Huseiniks who are not in Huseinik, while you've got 6,000 of them in Huseinik. So it's a huge proportion of the village had migrated as workers away, and they also show where they've been. So the United States, Constantinople are being the main destinations. The map also shows the number of schools, students, churches, churchmen. It's an incredible resource that we have of the final picture of Armenians in the Kharpert Plain before World War I, when it all came to an end. Can you hear me well? Yeah? Yeah.
Yes.
You don't need to see that, but this gives you an idea of the sort of data that we have. It's important to show this to people. This is originally in Armenian because it shows that we are capable of writing our own history. There are sources that exist. I mentioned American sources earlier, but there are also there's a whole reservoir of Armenian language materials, most of it which has not been integrated into historiographies in the history writing process, but the information exists. The previous two maps were taken from such sources in Armenian, and I've turned them into statistical maps for demonstration purposes. But if you were to go to the Elazığ today, Elazığ meaning the Emezre, right at the foothill of Kharpert itself, Elazığ is a very large city. This is not the image that you would expect to go to see when you go there. But over the last 100 years, the area has gone through tremendous changes. First, you had out-migration of population in 1950s and 60s. Then you had an immigration of other people from surrounding villages in 1970s, with further urbanization, with the dam projects flooding villages. So the whole profile of Armenian villages, as well as the town of Elazığ, have been changing over the last 100 or so years. And again, downtown Mezre, almost nothing remains of buildings that were there when the Armenians were there. Mezre was predominantly Armenian town and a government center by World War I. But today, almost none of the old city remains. And you have what you would describe as a shanty town. it's not a shanty town, it's a poor area. It's got its own buzz. And these pictures were taken in winter in case you wonder about the colors. But this is a daily life of how people live in the area today. However, this is a picture I took on the way to Kharpert, the town itself. What you see in the foreground is the village of Huseinik. Huseinik is remarkable. It still has the same city plan. The village plan is still the same. Some of the old buildings are still there. And in the background, you can see all these new high-rise buildings. Many of these were built mainly after about 10, 15 years ago, because the area was hit by a huge earthquake. And they decided that they need to resettle the population of the big cities in new areas in order to avoid further devastation in future earthquakes. What that means is that much of the Kharpert plain has been changing because of construction. So these would be agricultural areas. I believe Morenik would be in the distance, for example. All right, but in the old days, there were fields. Today, already you have urbanization and large buildings. But you can still find old buildings even in Huseinik. They still exist. I would say in the ratio of 1 to 10, 10% of the old buildings still remain. Most buildings have fallen apart, partly because, as you can see, the construction, it's wood and adobe mud bricks. So unless you look after these buildings well, they will fall apart. And only recently have they decided to save some of them for tourism. But so most of them have been destroyed. And again, as you drive outside in the Kharpert plain, you will see this type of scenario. So the romantic image that we have of what our ancestors left behind is not there anymore. If you go to Parchanj today, I doubt you'll find a single building, or if you Pazmashen or Khulakyo. These were huge buildings, they are huge villages, huge settlements, but none of the old remain there, old places of habitation. And as you go to Kharpert, this is the main entrance to Kharpert today. Kharpert has been going through a renovation program. I'll tell you later more about it. But as you drive in, this is what you see. Ahead of you, those buildings, that's where the Euphrates College used to be. None of the old buildings are there. They got vacation homes and regular houses there. The whole area has been decimated, and we will touch that in a minute. Fortunately, we can reconstruct the map of Kharpert, the town of Kharpert, using various sources, Armenian as well as Turkish sources. And I've drawn this from such materials, and this shows you the town of Kharpert, and the yellowy areas are the areas where the Christian population lived, predominantly Armenians, but also Assyrians. And in the center is where was the Muslim quarter, as well as government buildings and the market. And you can see that the green are the mosques and turbes. A turbe is like a small mausoleums, very Islamic. So this is a central area where Muslims lived, and on two edges are where the Christians were. Kharpert was 35% Armenian. Sometimes the way we talk, we think that Kharpert was an Armenian city. It wasn't an Armenian city. It was a mixed city with more Muslims there than Armenians. Look, this will be a typical picture of Armenians. Young girls at the school in Mezre, just down the road, from 1910. So these could be our ancestors. Some of these girls, if they survived the genocide or before the genocide, may well have come to the United States. And as for the others, we know that they did not survive. Again, an image from Kharpert. It was a culture city. It had a developed educational establishment, not just the American missionary who were there, but also the Armenian Apostolic Church. They had leading schools. Tilgadensi was a famous Armenian writer for boys and for girls. Although boys got preferential treatment, even in education, even in a place like Kharpert. Kharpertsis were literate. There was even a school of literature, Kharperti Karaganuchun. So that's its own literary genre. So it was an relatively advanced community by most standards, and certainly by Ottoman standards. So Going back in time, this would have been one of the main quarters to the west of the city. It's called Upper Quarter, Veritar. In the background, you see the American Euphrates College right across. Earlier, you saw that where the vacation homes were. In the foreground, you see Surp Hagop Church. Behind it was a central school of Telgadensi. And this was one of the main Armenian quarters. We have a lot of photographs of this quarter because Americans were there. But the larger quarter was Varita on the other side of the city. This whole mountainside below the castle was the Armenian quarter and Assyrians as well. So most Armenians would have lived in this part of the town. As you can see, it was a well-built city, on the side of a mountain. And the third part was this Sinamur. This is to the south of the castle, much smaller, and it was already dying by the turn of a century. People were migrating to Huseinik and Kharpert, but this section of the town, the quarter, was still there. So these are the main Armenian quarters, and above is the castle, the citadel of Kharpert. Now, unfortunately, during the genocide, let me go this way. During the genocide, as you know, most Kharpertsis who were there at the time did not make it. Kharpert had a very high rate of death rate during the genocidal process. Most of them were killed on the way to so-called deportations. A large number of young girls and some boys and children were taken for assimilation into Muslim households. But this is a deportation image. I think it's taken by Leslie Davis, the American consul. And it shows you Armenians leaving in 1915 to supposed resettlement in the Syrian desert. I'll go back to what was earlier. This is a map of the Armenian genocide. The data comes from Talat Pasha personal records. This is an Ottoman source. The blacks denote the number of people who went missing between 1915 and 1915. So as you can see, Kharpert had a 97% what we would call a loss rate, either death or assimilation. So between 1915 and 1917, the government estimated that 97% of Armenians from Kharpert went missing, meaning dead. In Adana, it's only 38%. So when we think of the Armenian genocide, you realize that there are differences in terms of survival rates of Armenians, those who were allowed to stay behind and those who disappeared. And Kharpert was one of the major targeted regions for annihilation. Now, this is an incredible picture because it was taken in 1919 after the genocide. And what you can see here is to the right is the Armenian quarter. It's the Armenian quarter that's already destroyed. To the left is a Muslim quarter, which is still standing. And in the center is St. Stepanos Church. It's missing its dome. It was a dome church. It would soon be completely destroyed. But already you can see that even during the genocidal process, it's not just Armenians who had left the area, but they had ransacked the Armenian quarter. From description we have, they took all the wood they could out to burn as fuel. And already by 1919, this is a Varita. It no longer was in existence. To the left is a Muslim quarter that was still remaining. So this is a very important photograph because often people who want to defend the Turkish state will say, oh, Kharpert just fell into disrepair over 50 years or whatever, when in fact, yes, the town did fall into disrepair, but the Armenian quarter was destroyed in 1915 as part of during the genocide. On the Turkish side, the Turkish quarter continued to fall into disrepair after the departure of Armenians, I guess for economic reasons, and the Muslim population started leaving. And this is, again, the same Turkish quarter that was still standing in 1919 is already pretty much a ruin. What we see is one of the main mosques that's still kept there, Ulu Mosque. Right next to it is where the Armenian church, St. Stepanos, was. And already there's nothing there. So the Armenians have completely disappeared, as well as their dwellings and whatever cultural elements that they had left behind. What is interesting is that in about 5-6 years ago, the Turkish government decided that they want to revive Kharpert as a historic center as a touristic center, and they apply to UNESCO for accreditation. It's a PR, public relations exercise. They're not going to get UNESCO recognition for many different reasons. But what is interesting is that the Turkish state started to rebuild the city, renovate the city, redefine the city in a systematic manner. And what they did, I'll tell you the end before I tell you the beginning. What they did was they renovated the Muslim areas, and they recreated Kharpert now as a Muslim Turkish city by excluding Armenians effectively and by favoring the renovation of Muslim sites. So this is the center of the city, very pretty, very touristic. And they took care of the mosques and the Islamic sites. This is Sara Hatun. This is right next to the Armenian Quarter. It's a beautiful mosque. This was part of the cultural world of Kharpertsis. They would walk past these Muslim mosques as they walked through the city or as they went to the market. And the Turkish government took great care in renovating these sites. And this is when we also launched a project. We have a project right now where we are engaged in drawing attention to this whole renovation project and petitioning Turkish authorities and civil society, telling them that you should be proud of Kharpert as a multicultural city where people live side by side, and not as a Muslim Turkish city as you are trying to redefine it. But as you can see, the mosques have been built beautifully. I think they're beautiful. I think they're interesting. And it also, but it shows the priorities of Turkish authorities today when dealing with such matters. This is not typical, by the way, in old Turkey, but here it's a particularly strong Turkish nationalist stamp that we see in the renovation process. I'll better jump on that one. So if you look at a touristic flyer, in here they have a little ruin to the left, that's Surp Hagop. To the right is a little church, which they call Kızıl Kilise, Red Church. They don't even name the church for what it is. The name is Garabet, Surp Garabet. The church of Surp Stepanos isn't there at all. So already you see how it's being repackaged for Turkish and Muslim tourists or unsuspecting Europeans who go there. Is to showcase this as a Muslim city. But part of the work that we do as Project Kharpert 22 is we are keeping tabs on the developments in Kharpert today and publicizing it and putting pressure on Turkish authorities, saying what you're doing is actually shameful and it's an embarrassment to your people. Many Turks do not approve of denying the Armenian history of the town. And we hope that over time they will change their minds. This is a picture of Verita, the upper quarter. To the left would have been Euphrates College. And I think for comparison purposes, this is what it used to look like. So in a city that's going renovation for touristic purposes, this is what remains of an Armenian quarter and an Armenian church, which has been circled from what was there before World War I. So our job is to keep tabs to photographic records, but other materials, and to pressure Turkish authorities that what they're doing is futile and counterproductive even to their own interests. This is Surp Hagop from the other side. As you can see, there's no protection. There are no protection notices on it. There's no fencing. So what remains is also doomed to fall down. If you look at that photograph, that looks like a two floors of a church. In fact, the ground you see there is actually the first floor. There's another level. It's just that the entire Armenian quarter has collapsed on itself. So you're literally walking on top of what remains, and the ground has been raised by 5, 6, 7 feet today as you walk over it. So the whole area is not protected. It shows you the willful neglect of Turkish authorities. And if you get closer to the building, you can see that there are still people digging down looking for treasure. They're still damaging the little that remains. So part of our record, part of my work, is to draw attention, to record these developments, and to put more and more pressure on the authorities, saying this is unacceptable. You may not be able to rebuild this church, but what you can do is you can preserve what remains as an archaeological monument or archaeological remain. And back to the other side, the main Armenian quarter, Varita, lower quarter, very pretty. They show this panorama even today. People go there to look at the panorama of the castle that's been renovated. To the left is an old Assyrian monastery. It's a token Christian presence that's never open. And there's this pretty panorama they show. In the middle of the photograph is actually Surgarabed Church. This is where the main Armenian quarter was, just to show you as before. This is what was there before, and this is what is there today. So there is no notation, there is no mention that this was an Armenian quarter. It's been completely erased. And here too, those terraces that you see ahead of you, those are all the destroyed Armenian buildings, the houses that have fallen down, collapsed on themselves. And that's what remains. In the middle of the quarter is Surp Church. So this is the other main church that still remains, right? Surp Stepanov doesn't exist at all. Again, it's completely, there's no protection. There's no protection notice. There's no fencing. Anybody can go and walk all over it, damage it, and people do, sometimes unsuspecting tourists as well. And the authorities allow it to happen, or they don't take measures to stop it. This is in a archaeological zone, a renovated city. Again, as you walk through the Armenian quarter, this is what remains of the houses and the roads that were there before. It's completely flattened. They've planted a forest on top. Maybe it's a good thing. Underneath that forest, underneath this ground, is the Varita, the lower quarter of Armenians. We are bearing witness not just an Armenian presence in the past, we're also bearing witness to what's happening to the memory of Armenians in Kharpert today. And that's important if we want to build up pressure on Turkish authorities. They want us to forget. And I've had this conversation with some officials there, and they were quite bluntly say, they would say, well, we don't think it's interesting. We don't preserve it because we don't think it's interesting, or it doesn't relate to us. So for them, history is about Turkishness or Armenianness. It's not about the city, the history of the city or the town. They favor the Turkish Muslim identity, and they want the Christian element to be forgotten. It will be forgotten unless we bear witness and we record what's happened in the past, what's happening today. And this is Sidamud. Again, nothing remains there. This was the smallest one. This is just above Huseinik. The castle at the top has been rebuilt. It's not even renovated. They literally rebuilt it for tourists to come and look at. But underneath is where the Armenian quarter was. I believe that's where the Surpnashan church was. This is the old city. So these photographs are very, very important to make the case that we want to make and not to allow what the current authorities are trying to do, to forget the Armenian presence in that part of the world. The only other major site that still remains is the old bathhouse near the Armenian-Assyrian part of the lower town. Again, it's not protected. It's still there's a huge structure, many, many rooms, but this was a hammam, the bathhouse in the valley below the Armenian quarter. So that's Kharpert itself. Regarding outside, we don't have many photographs of the villages, right? There's a plethora of materials of the Kharpert itself, but this is a rare photograph of Khulakyo. Khulakyo is right on the outskirts of, on the plain of Mezre or Elazığ today. The church isn't there anymore. There's an entirely new town there. And it's an important place because the village, the monastery of Hulavank is right next to this village. As you can see, it's a very flat and fertile area, well-kept houses, but none of them survive today. Outside of Khulakyu is the Armenian monastery, huge monastic complex, and what you have remaining is just a small part of the original church, which is this part here that's been collapsed, Surpkevork, and the narthex that was built afterwards. Already you can see the development of new buildings on the horizon. So as the town gets bigger, it gets closer, these structures get destroyed. The fencing around this monastery, or the central part of the monastery, there was an orphanage here too, was only put there recently. The door is always open. I've never seen it closed, and people still go in there and they dig around for treasure. but this is so it was an important monastic center originally from about 10th century. It's thought mostly Savank, but often with these buildings, there's the original structure, and then over the centuries they got new structures added or it's been rebuilt. But it's thought that it dates back to the 10th century. It's the same structure today. This wall, this opening, wasn't there 10 years ago. All right, so even within my own lifetime, over the last 20 years, shall we say, when I started monitoring it, you have huge chunks of this place falling apart, and the authorities, frankly, don't do anything to stop it. So the fencing was put recently, and it's only for show. It's never been closed. On the other hand, you have another one, another church at Tadem, Surp Asfazadzin. This is actually supposedly much older. You can see that from the architectural perspective and its condition. So the older it is, in the worst case it is. But what's interesting about the Tadem church and monastery is that the local village, there's a village around it, they look after it. So the idea that these people are against us is not necessarily true. The government doesn't protect this. There are no protection notices. There are no fences, but the local people make sure that, as far as they can help it, that this is not destroyed. And this is from the Byzantine era. This is a much older church, and it used to be the seat of a bishopric. The same structure again. It is possible that if the authorities change their tune, it could be renovated and made much more presentable. But even in this state, it is a testament to an ancient culture and civilization of that region. Most other buildings of this age have already disappeared by virtue of the fact that their age, and of course the destruction that's taken place in that part of the world. And interestingly, locals look after it. This is inside the church room. Again, remarkable how much of it still stands. All right, so you still have this sort of legacy of the Armenian presence in the Kharpert plain that is still accessible to us, but it's falling apart. So how much longer will this last? We don't know. And it's important that we pressure, we beg, or whatever, the Turkish authorities to rethink their current strategic indifference. I don't think it's just indifferent. I think it's deliberate, of allowing these places to falter and to fall apart. On the other hand, here's another church near Palu, Habab village. This was a village where Hrant Foundation did a lot of good work. And again, the local people were awakened to the culture, Armenian cultural marvel in their own village. And today they look after it. It's a positive example of what could be the reality on the ground. In this particular village, Armenians are welcome. The local population looks after the village. They don't allow treasure hunters to come in at night and to start digging around supposed Armenian treasure. And I wanted to show this to you so that you don't have this idea that Turkey is a hostile place where we should be afraid. We shouldn't be afraid. What we should have the courage of contesting the bad when we see it, and to applaud the good that we see. So in the village of Habab, the local population actively look after the Armenian church. They know about the Armenian genocide, and the least they can do is look after what remains of the Armenian heritage of the village. Again, the same church, well kept. No one is advocating that the church be rebuilt. There's no Armenian congregation there, but the church in this condition is a testament, but also a memorial to the Armenian presence that was there and what happened to them. This church represents us. We don't exist there anymore. In this current state, I think it means a lot to keep it in this way. And here's another one. This is what's called Surp Savoric in Palu, the only remaining church. A few years ago, it was completely neglected. We also talked with the local authorities in Palu, and they put a fence around it. We said, look, let's keep what we've got. This is a memorial to the Armenians who live there. So this is something profoundly sad for us, but also profoundly important, and what should we say? It's a memorial to a lost part. And they did put a fence around it. The building isn't, I've been there several times now, is not damaged by outsiders. Before you could see animals inside, cows grazing, and so forth. But now there's an awareness and a sense of shame that they're trying to overcome as well. I mean, just because the state is anti-Armenian, it doesn't mean that local people, even government officials, are against Armenians. And what we do and how we talk with them and the representations we make matters. They do listen to us. They listen to us for practical reasons. They want tourists, but they also listen to us because they're interested in history, know about the Armenian genocide. The least they can do is in some ways reject that legacy by looking after by the little that remains behind today. This year, for the first time near that church, I went to this little grotto. They had no idea what it was. I took the local tourism official. I said, "Do you know what this is?" He said, "No." I said, "This is where, according to Armenian tradition, Saint Mesrom Mashtod's received the Armenian alphabet from God, right? This is a grotto. According to our tradition, Mesrom Mashtod's created the Armenian alphabet. It's a little cave on the mountainside in Palu. We know about it. There are descriptions of it in, like, Cervantes in the 19th century. He describes going there and falling on his knees because it's a holy site. And you tell them, you do realize that after Latin and Greek, Armenian is the most important language to take ownership in the sense of looking after it and making them presentable. For them, this was just a cave. Okay. So that was my general presentation. I presume you can still hear me.
Yes.
The whole idea is of the work that I'm doing and the ownership. In Armenian, you say derganknil, right? You're standing up for what is yours, your heritage. Unless we ourselves are aware of what that entails, what that's all about in terms of bookish knowledge, then we're also lost. But if we take ownership of our past, the legacy of Armenians in that region, we have the ability to project our knowledge onto Turkey, to engage with people there, especially local people, but even officials, in order to make sure that what remains of our history is still protected as far as possible, as far as practical. And then we win over people. Many places that when you go these areas, I just showed you, so, say Mesrom Mashtod's cave, is the locals don't know the Armenian. They just say it's a church. They don't know the name of the church. They don't know the details of the Armenians who used to live there, often because they themselves are not even native there. They themselves came from elsewhere. Right? Others are aware of the destruction of Armenians, but they have a positive attitude to Armenians. They will say, when the Armenians were here, we had an economy, we lived well with them, and they know about the genocide. I don't belabor the genocide issue. We don't need to talk about the genocide. We can talk about what was there before 1915. Getting into a conversation, the genocide issue can come much later, and you'll find that they will raise it themselves, right? It's about creating a dialogue on the ground, deciding what is important, safeguarding what remains, and also safeguarding our histories with our own engagement of these issues. And I do take tour groups there as well. I can say everyone who's been on them has been overwhelmed by what they've seen. It's not what they expect. It's a learning experience, because you realize that a lot has changed over 100 years, but also a lot has not changed over 100 years. Now it's a question of preserving that memory with our active participation and making sure that we have the specialists, the experts that can play the critical role of making this type of knowledge available in a sort of critical way, not just bombastic, everything is good about Armenians and everything about Muslims is bad. We're not anti-Muslim. I'm not anti-Muslim. And I keep telling them, when I'm there, I said the mosque in Kharpert were as much part of the landscape, the social landscape of our ancestors, as were the churches. I mean, the Turks have been there for almost 1,000 years. So it's also a mindset of how we relate to local people. And Kharpert is supposedly one of the most nationalistic parts of, and Elazığ, one of the most nationalistic parts of Turkey. But in my experience is that when you go there and you talk to people as human beings, people to people, you find that even with that profile, that people are actually very, very friendly and open to engagement and dialogue. And this is us going there plays a critical role in breaking that ice and beginning those conversations. And I think that if we continue that way, the future will be better than the last 100 years of continued destruction in that region. So I think I'll stop there. That's 44 minutes. So you told me 45. So.
You know, if you stop sharing, then you can see the people who are on the Zoom, and we can give them an opportunity to ask you questions, make comments,
Yes.
whatever.
Let me see, figure how to stop sharing, but yeah.
Great. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Any comments or questions, anything? Margaret Chevian.
Very wonderful presentation. I've been to Turkey twice. One time with Armin Aroyan. It was a very wonderful trip. And I was castigated a lot by my Armenian friends. I said I would never go to Turkey. I would not give them my money. I would not do this. I would not do that. And I feel if we don't go, then Turkey has won. We have to maintain some sort of interest and presence, as you said. If you're Italian, you can go to your family village. If you're Irish, you can go to your family village. Why can't we do the same thing?
Right.
I
Yes.
feel that very strongly.
I'm glad you say that. And you know what, Margaret, I tell people it's a it's a reclamatory experience. We are reclaiming something that we thought we had lost, and it's something we can also pass on to next generations. I took my 17-year-old son there last year, and that was very important for me to do, because that's another 50 to 60 years of some sort of tangible memory. And I think it's important that we empower ourselves in that way. I agree with you. You get a lot more than the sandwiches you're eating when you're there. So it's money well spent. And I would again, nobody has been disappointed. You're getting something that you never realized you thought was completely lost. Yeah.
Most of the Turkish residents that we talked to were very welcoming, very interested in seeing us. I think a lot of them realize they probably have some Armenian blood, based on what happened after the genocide. So I think that they're curious about us as well.
Absolutely. And they will ask you questions because they don't know either, many of these people, like you said. And that's where we have a critical role to play in making things better than they've been in the past, recent past.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, anyone?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, hello. Arad, this is very interesting. I'm glad somebody is talking about this. It's a topic that I think is kind of cast off as being a niche subtopic of Armenian history because there is a paucity of information until you know where to look. I mean, I come from the Mamaratul Aziz general, Sanjak area, but I'm particularly interested in asking you about what you know about the Kibon Maden area, because this is an area that has really next to no information other than a few photos and maybe one or two articles on Hoshamadian talking about this. And this is an area that I've researched to the extent that I can, what it looks like, etc. And I know you also mentioned early in the presentation you were talking about this concept that a lot of the photos that we have are also limited to where the photographers were in these places. So some of the more rural, less densely populated areas, especially when you get out, like I'll show the map, especially when you get out up here, where you have a lot of the smaller villages like Zak, Kushna. These are villages nobody hears about or knows about because not only did they not exist anymore, but this was that northern area of Arabgir near Again, Arabgir, there's a lot of these smaller villages, much more of a paucity of information there, especially with photos, information, etc. What I do know and what I wanted to ask you about is a lot of these areas around Keban Maden. Like, I come from a very small village called Kushna, which you may or may not have heard of. But Kushna and the areas around that, this is all now Grey Wolf's territory. So the political control of this area is Grey Wolf territory, and the population is very sparsely populated by Kurds, almost entirely Kurds. So a lot of the small villages now, whether buildings exist or not, there's like 28 Kurds here, 52 Kurds here, and it's a question for me as a researcher and someone interested in Armenian history, and particularly my area of Armenian geography, which I've never heard anybody else coming from. What you may know about this area and the safety of going there, because that seems like a Grey Wolf territory in terms of its political control.
Okay, you're right. the photographic inventory is varied regarding where the photographers were, but
Yeah.
you'll be surprised what you can find. But you have to spend a lot of time looking at these materials.
Yeah.
You mentioned grey wolves. Grey wolves are the sort of Turkish fascists.
Yeah.
I mean, the Armenian haters.
Yes.
One reason that I work in Elazığ was because they're supposedly very strong there. I had a choice of doing this kind of project in Van, which is very much easier. I chose Elazığ because I wanted the experience of working in an area which were either AKP or grey wolves,
Mhm.
MHP, right? The right wingers.
Yeah.
I think as long as you're prudent, you're not going there with some Armenian flag and saying you're off your grandfather's property.
Yeah.
You should be okay. You should be careful. Now you being male and on your own might be a bit harder and young. They'll be suspicious,
Yeah.
but their suspicion will be more along the lines that you're only interested in the area because you're looking for the gold that your grandfather buried there, and they think they have a right to it, and that creates problems.
Yeah.
So, it's you have to be careful, but I would just go and one step at a time and make sure people know who you are. I never hide the fact I'm Armenian. You'll be surprised. Generally speaking, Turks are polite, even if they don't like you. They are polite to start off with, and you just make sure you don't provoke them. And if you think you're provoking them, then you walk back. I've only had once in my experience where I actually walked away from a village, only once in 30 years. So I would start from the can-do attitude rather than
No. Yeah.
being afraid. And I'm sure you're not afraid, although I may not wear kufiye, although it's the Turks are generally pro-Palestinian. But look as neutral. If you're in a mixed group, if there are women with you, that always breaks the ice. They see you in a different light.
Interesting.
But if you want to talk on something more specific, you can contact me separately, so we can stay on topic. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm
absolutely.
open to dialogue with you. Okay.
Yes, I
Thank
would,
you.
I would love to talk more. Thank you. Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate that.
Hey, Tallinn, you have a question? I see your hand up. Tallinn? Okay, Harry.
Hi, Martha, thank you so much. Ara, you do a fantastic job about letting Armenians know about what's going on in Turkey. So I want to compliment you. I saw what you did at the conference in California. You did a super job, and I'm hoping to see you in Kayseri next month. Okay?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to seeing you as well.
Yeah, because there's a lot of Turkish friends that I have there. I never thought I'd have one Turkish friend, but anyway, I have lots of Turkish friends. They're mostly academicians, journalists, professors, and so forth, because we're in Boston, we have Harvard here. So there's a lot of people that are here. And even right in Boston, we have a lot of Turkish friends who are very pro-Armenian. Of course, you probably might have the others too, but I'd rather work in the positive. And so I look forward to seeing you in March with
Yes.
the rest of the Husaniks, not the Husanik, the Tomarzatsis are coming.
Peki Sarati.
Yeah, right. Look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you,
Okay?
Harry.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Tallinn, do you want to ask your question? Maybe not, okay. Any other comments, questions? Oh, Steve?
Yes, hi, Ara.
Hi, Steve.
I'm wondering, my mother's family is from Hori, and my father's family is from Dadem, in Kharpert. If I tried to travel there, would I be able to see anything? Is there anything left?
I think Tadem is like a big landmark because of its, the big rock in the middle. You'll see the village. The old monastery you saw, that's Tadem Ivank. It's very nearby. That's why it's often called Tadem Monastery. Hol, I think you mentioned as well. Hol is mostly not there. We drove through it recently. Very little remains. We couldn't see any old buildings. Possibly if you hang around and you just talk to people, they might show you bits and pieces and give you information. But I couldn't be more specific than that. So there's like 50, 60 villages in Kharpert Plain.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ara, do you want to give us more information on your trip in June? You have the cities, et cetera, the locations.
Yes.
do people meet you in the UK and then everyone flies together? What are the logistics?
Well, the logistics is that once you sign on, we meet in Istanbul the night before. We stay in the same hotel and we travel the cars and we hit the
Oh, we lost him.
Just 1 minute.
What, you know, you keep chopping out, Ara. Oh, John,
But
well,
he's buffering.
yeah, he'll get back in. Oh. Well,
I'd like to ask the question later.
okay.
Super job you're doing.
Oh, wow, this is the longest pause.
Martha, may I ask, because you might know, what would be the best way to follow Ara's work or to know about trips he may be taking in the future?
You know what, he's rejoining.
Okay.
Well, let's see, where is he? Oh. Ara, okay, good. Okay, Ara, you're kind of on mute. You're not just kind of, you are on mute. Can you unmute yourself? There's a question about your work and how to follow your work and the trips. You're still on mute. Good. All right, good.
Okay. I'm actually using my phone. I think it's a better connection.
Okay, all right, okay. Michelle, you want to ask your question again?
Sure. It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you. My family
you.
is from Parchange. I was just wondering how we might continue to follow the work that you're doing, and learn about upcoming trips that you have planned and that kind of thing.
Okay. The best thing is I use Facebook a lot for updates and discussions. I try and keep it as interesting as possible. That'll be the best way of going forward with information, not
We
just
can
about the
friend
trip.
you. You want to be friends with us?
Yeah. I do check, by the way. You better have a profile. But my inclination would be to say yes. And you can ask questions, and there are people who've been on a trip before. They also chip in, so it is interesting. The trips are I think they're very organized because I work with a Turkish tour company, and every day is interesting. That's all I can say. And at the end we reach Kharpert. I often wondered whether if we got a large enough group of Kharperts, we could just a trip only Kharpert alone. So you stay in the area and then go to Çemişgezek and Agan and all these other places, Peri. But the current trip is amazing. Ani is amazing, Van is amazing, Tikranagir is amazing. So it's a good introduction if you've never been there.
Hey, Rafi, you have a question?
Yes, hi, Parevara. This is Rafi.
Oh, hi, Rafi. Anşmeses.
Inshallah, Tunis.
Good to see you. Tell them about your trip.
Indeed, I was just about to say that. It's more of a comment than a question. For those who don't know on this call, I was actually on the same trip with Ara last year. And if anyone has any hesitation, no one should have any hesitation. The trip is very worthwhile. And if anyone has any questions about the trip and wants to ask me, you can definitely reach out to me. But it's definitely a worthwhile trip. There's a lot of emotions involved with the trip, good, bad, and everything in between. But it's definitely a trip that I highly recommend anyone who's thinking of to definitely do it.
There you go.
Martha?
Yep. Oh, Bev?
Yeah. Hi, Ada. Beverly Sarabian here. You've spoken to my sister Linda a couple of times. Linda
Hey,
Sarabian.
that's right.
Yes.
Yes,
and,
I remember.
yeah, the two of us are coming along on the trip with you, and this is a fantastic introduction to that trip. Incredibly informative and also very evocative. So I have a preview of what I'm going to be experiencing when Linda and I travel with you. So thank you very much for your deep
Thank you.
and your incredible. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, same here.
Any other comments, questions, anything?
Yes, hi. I think I'm okay now. Can you hear me?
Yes,
It's
yes.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm really been interested. My father's father and grandparents were from Kharpert, and I'm really interested more in the genealogy part of it. And now that my kids are older and my son is a historian, and they're asking me questions, and I just don't have any answers. And I'm just wondering, what have you done on that end?
Genealogy, which I don't
Yes,
understand what
yes,
I
like
don't
the
I don't
yeah.
I don't do genealogy. Obviously,
No,
I
I know, but like just like some of the historical records, if you know anything about any of the records they kept, or did they burn them all, or it's just
no.
stuff like that.
Well, we lost those records during the genocide. There are records of some of the orphanages. The Americans, as you may very well know, they published the names of the orphans who were collected there after the genocide, 1819 up to between 1918 and 22. I mean, hundreds of them. There were also orphanages that were run by the Armenian Church. Their records, I'm not sure where they are. They will be fascinating. So, other than those, the local parish records, church records, they are almost certainly they've gone. There's no trace of them, like other parts of the former Ottoman Empire.
Yeah, can you share that list from 1878 again, just because I'm curious? You know,
Okay.
like for example, my great grandfather's name, my father's grandfather, like
Okay.
we don't
Those
even know
are
his name. It's just be interesting to see if I can find it.
the 1878 data is a village population. It doesn't give a breakdown of the actual people who were living there. We don't have those records. So there are no baptism records, no death records, no marriage records. That's just a population survey that was done, but to the village level and not beyond that. I think George, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think George Arjayan, who lives
Yeah.
in New England, he deals with genealogy. I mean, he would be the better person to ask
Yeah,
this
and
type of question.
yeah, and Talon, you can also ask Margaret Chevian,
Only local, only very local.
but she knows she is one of our genealogy specialists. She and Janet Hauser.
Yeah, especially because I believe the name changed. So there was a change difference between when they went to Lebanon and then coming here, and just curious.
Right.
And I
Well,
added it to the chat. There's an absolutely fabulous Armenian genealogy Facebook group. And I put the link in the
right.
chat, and George is a part of that group, and there's a lot of really fabulous researchers there.
Good.
Margaret?
I have another question. The documents that you showed when you were screen sharing, are those on the Facebook page, the Gomidas website, or?
They're on a related page. There's also a Facebook page called Project Kharpert 2022. That page was set up specifically as a lobbying tool to address the local government in the Kharpert region today. So we upload that type of information as a way of putting more sort of gentle pressure and to inform people who live in that part of the world today. Lots of Turks follow what we do. You'd be surprised how much interest there is, and if you give enough material to work with, and as this information spreads out, I think we'll get more and more supporters over time, and the local authorities will have to change their tune. So Project Kharpert 2022 is also on Facebook. If you join my group, you'll see it. That I always have links there. So yeah, that's a lobbying tool. If you want to get involved in that type of work, in being sensible, what's a sort of soft language to use in order to win more people over? How would you talk to Turks? I'd be interested in that type of cooperation with people who are public diplomats. Never use the language of hatred or violence, or that's so destructive and stupid thing to do. I think we can achieve so much more by being peaceful, by shaking hands and saying we come from this area, and we're here. I start to drink water from our ancestors' fountains. It breaks the ice, and And then once they trust you and they start talking, you'll be amazed how much influence you have. And that's public diplomacy. That's the right way forward. And we need people who are good at that, who don't feel hurt and hateful. It is upsetting, but if you let that get to you, then you can't do much good afterwards, right? But if you can stay cool and you're informed and you're careful how you talk, there's a lot of good that you can do. And I've seen the results. I mean, even on the trips that we're on, we're always coming across people unexpectedly, and you'd be surprised how often they reach out to us and they shake our hands. They can see the human side of what we do. All right.
Okay, any other comments, questions, concerns, anything?
All right. You're going to be going to Nirze and to Evkere. Those are my Nirze is my father's village and Evkere is my mother's village. I've been there many times, but seeing that you're talking about this reconstruction stuff, I heard off the grapevine that they're going to do my father's village. And anything you might suggest when I go there?
Well, we can talk. When we go there, that's the whole point, right? We show up, we talk to people, we see who are the decent people, and we network from there. I mean, it's as simple as that. Just turn up and, speak up.
You're doing a great job, and I want to commend you on this.
Well, I hope news there and elsewhere. Kaiser is a difficult area too, but even there, people have already reached out to us, and it's about networking, seeing the good in people, and working on from there.
Great job.
So good.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, anything else?
I have a just a comment or question. My maternal and paternal great grandparents are from, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, Pasmashan?
Pasmashan, yes.
Okay. I was wanting to know what the conditions are there as far as the landmarks. Is there any churches or anything left there?
We went there as a group a few years ago. Nothing that remains except that they showed us where the church was, a huge church. So they showed us the location of that place, and there's a fountain there that Armenians have built that's still being used today. Some of the piping has been changed, but the whole village has been rebuilt. I mean, the Armenian buildings have fallen down. Perhaps some of the street plans are the same, but they know where the church was. And they thought they knew where the cemetery was, but it's not clear. Often Armenians, as you may not be aware of it, but cemeteries are not that important in the Armenian church tradition. The idea of building big tombstones is not always followed by in villages, because you believe that once you die, your soul goes to heaven or wherever else, and the body is not that important. So they shown us location where there were the cemetery was, but there's no way of verifying it because there's nothing really there. And that's again a common occurrence. Very often they'll show you a field. They said that's where the Armenian cemetery was, but there's nothing upstanding on the surface.
That's upsetting.
Yeah, so you can go to the where the church was, but yeah, that's a reality. I mean, those buildings that were built of mud and mud bricks and wood would not survive over 100 years.
Yes, that's understandable, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing. How do you know what the population, or I must have missed it, how big of a village it was?
Bizmashan was bigger than what is now. I'm estimating that there are probably about 150 households at the most. Having walked right all the way around, that's the full extent. There were people from Bizmashan even in the Armenians up to 1940s. They left afterwards. But there was no local memory. The people we spoke with in Bizmashan were from the gentlemen there, the Kebana area. So they left their villages when the villages were flooded because of the barrages, and they bought land in Bizmashan, and that's where they live today. So they're not local. Then they were interested in what we had to tell them. So us going there plays a positive purpose. Next time I go there, I'll have more information to tell them about the village population, the number of churches or schools, what the Armenians were like, and then they'll be the carriers of our memory on the land itself. They're interested too.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Very quick question for Ara. Where do I contact you so that I may, communicate more specifically?
Okay. If you contact me Facebook, we can take it on from there, if that's okay with you. Messenger and an email. Okay.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for this? Ara, this was absolutely fabulous. Really, thank you so much. Really, really wonderful. Thank you. And you may see many people from this that we're seeing on the screen on your trip.
I hope so. Okay. Well, I hope you found it interesting, and it was good for me to have feedback. This is a living project for me, and hopefully, we will speak a year from now or 2 years from now, there'll be a lot more to say in a positive way. This is not a dead issue. It's not about the past. We're actually talking about the present and the future as well.
Very
And that's an essential part of what we do.
excellent, excellent.
Thank you very, very
Fine.
much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for joining.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay,
Malta.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Wonderful job.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
You.